Welcome to Cybersecurity Awareness Training. This course will last approximately 30 minutes and is designed to help end users begin to think about cybersecurity much in the same way we think about physical security in our daily lives. We hope that by raising the awareness of the issues and pitfalls of the digital world, we can collectively make things a bit more safe and secure. Now, to put us in the right frame of mind, we're going to start with a brief video. This video is about 2 minutes, and in the video you'll see a gentleman by the name of Kevin Mitnick. Kevin is a world-renowned security expert. He's a what we call a white hat hacker. He's a good hacker. And he's going to show you just how easy it is to get infected with a virus that can expose your username and password much without you even knowing it. So let's turn it over to Kevin for a minute, and then we will come back and begin our discussion about cybersecurity.
Have you ever received an Office document in email? I'm talking about PowerPoint, Excel, or even a Word doc. Now, when you receive this in an email, presumably your company is checking those documents to make sure they're not malicious. They're checking with antivirus software and other systems that are out there. So I want to show you how a hacker could steal your username and password by simply you opening up a Word doc. So let me show you what I have here. What we have here is we have a Windows 7 laptop that's running the latest security patches. I also installed McAfee antivirus and updated all the security definitions as of about 30 minutes ago. And over here on this computer is the hacker's computer. So when I go ahead and open up this Word doc, I want you to pay attention and see what happens on the hacker system here. So what we have over here is we have a Word doc. It's actually the Mitnick Security Mutual Non-Disclosure Agreement. Now, if I ever send this to you because we ever do business in the future, don't worry, it's going to be a different version. I would never send you this version. But let me show you what this version actually does. But first, we're going to check it. We're going to right-click on it. We're going to scan for threats. We're going to clean if it's dirty, okay? And as we can see, McAfee Antivirus says this Word doc is clean. It's safe to use. So let's go ahead and open it up. Now remember what I said earlier, you want to pay attention to the hacker computer. So we go ahead and open it up. And as we can see here, it looks like a fair mutual non-disclosure agreement. There's nothing embedded or anything that looks suspicious. But what happened over here is we see a bunch of text on the screen. Now we see that it's repeated a few times. It's actually the same thing, but I'm going to highlight what we have here. And what we have here is we have the username that opened it up. That was actually in the clear. We see it's username VPN here. And then we have a bunch of numbers and characters here. And what is this? This is actually an encrypted or hashed version of your password. It looks like just these letters and numbers because Microsoft doesn't store your password in the clear because it would be way too easy for hackers to get it. But hackers are very innovative. Just because Microsoft tries to obfuscate the password, we could use tools like dictionary attacks, what we call brute force attacks, or pre-computed passwords, and actually crack the password. So let me show you how easy it is. So we're on the attacker computer, and we run this program that allows me to crack the password, and we run it. Wow! And as we could see, I'm logged into the user VPN, and the password here is no before rocks. Think about that. You receive, or your colleague receives, a Word doc in an email. They simply click it to open up that Word doc, and the bad guy gets your username and password. So what do you have to do? You have to stop, you have to look, and you have to think before you click a Word doc from a person, sent from a person that you simply don't know.
When we start to have these conversations, many people will ask, why do we need to have a conversation about information security? And in reality, the reason is because in the digital world, we trust insecure data from unauthenticated and usually untrusted sources. Now, if you feel like the baby on this slide after hearing that, you're not alone, but don't worry, as we progress through the course, I think it'll all be making a little bit more sense. So let's first start with a few definitions so that we're all on the same page as we have this conversation. First, when we discuss data, we're talking about any electronically stored information. It could be an email, it could be a website that's transmitted across the internet, it could be an Excel or a Word document, PowerPoint file, or the video that you're watching right now. When we're talking about authenticated versus unauthenticated sources, we're talking about, do we know who or what we are talking to? Is it authenticated? Can we verify that whoever the person is saying they are, they really are? If you think about email, email is almost always unauthenticated. There's no way for you to know that the person who said they sent you the email really, truly sent you that email. When we discuss firewalls, we're talking about a gatekeeper. This is a security system, whether it's on a computer or at the edge of a network, that kind of looks at every piece of data that comes and goes and says, who are you? Where did you come from? Where are you going? What's your business here? And makes a decision to say whether or not that piece of data should be allowed through its gate. Whether it's a virus, an adware, malware, spyware, we're going to call all of that malicious software. It's bad software that does something negative to the computing environment. And lastly, software patches are a piece of software, oftentimes Microsoft releases these every Tuesday, that corrects a problem or a known issue with the software. Oftentimes they correct security-related issues. So the reason why we have these trainings, though, is because end users of security systems are always the last line of defense. As technology professionals, we can spend tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars in technology to try to fix security holes, but if an end user gives away their username and password or does something that could possibly endanger the information security, there's very little we can do to stop it. So we have to have these kinds of conversations to help that piece of the puzzle. So first, I would like everybody to think about, how do we authenticate in person? If we're walking down the hallway and we see a coworker, we know who they are by looking at them. We've been introduced to them, so we know their name. We can say hello. They say hello back. And in some level, we can now trust that that person is the person we think they are. If a new individual that you've never been introduced to, say, comes to your counter and wants to pay by check, you may ask to see a license. The license is a government-issued ID. It has a photo. It has some other pieces of information that the individual can verify for us. You can compare the photo against the person who's standing in front of you, and you can reasonably well authenticate the fact that that person is who they said they are. And again, I talk about email again. As you see, there's no real way to authenticate email. There's no piece of information that we have, the way email is structured today, that can help us to authenticate that that person who sent us the email really is who they said they are. Now, the other thing I'd like you to think about is, how do you keep your home safe? When you leave in the morning, you lock the door. When you get out of your car after you parked it in the parking lot, you probably lock those doors as well. Many people, however, don't treat computers in the same way. So they'll get up from the computer to go to a meeting or to walk down the hallway and speak to somebody, and they leave their computers unlocked. You're leaving as much vulnerability on that computer as you would as if you left your front door unlocked, right? There's a lot of information behind our computers, our bank account information, our usernames and passwords might be there. You might be logged on to email that would gain somebody access to other accounts through password resets. There's a lot of information that computers hold. So a very simple technique, very first kind of line of defense, if you're going to get up and away from a computer and you're logged on with your username and password, which is a legal representation of you, hit Control-Alt-Delete and the Enter key, or hit the Windows key, hold it down and hit the L key, and lock the computer so that somebody else can't walk up and basically impersonate you on that machine. A lot of times we'll get questions that say, well, you guys spend a lot of money on technology. That's probably doing 90% of the job of protecting us. So I want to talk a little bit about how computers might not be protecting us. In a normal circumstance, if you're going to go out to tdbank.com, you would point a web browser at www.tdbank.com. It would reach across the internet to another computer, which would give you back the homepage of tdbank.com. You would submit some sort of username and password, maybe a code, to the TD Bank website, and you would return your account information. You can make some transfers. You could pay a bill if you'd like. That would be a normal transaction. But let's kind of get back to the idea of the very first or second slide that we talked about. Let's assume that you trusted some insecure data from an unauthenticated source. Maybe you clicked a link in an email, or you opened a file attachment that you didn't know where it was from. And maybe nothing bad happened. Because oftentimes hackers and attackers will create a virus that doesn't let you know it's there. It'll just sit there, listening, waiting, looking for important data that it wants to collect and send back to the bad guys. So let's assume that you did one of these things, and instead of going to tdbank.com, what's going to happen is you're going to go to www.tdbank.com, but it's actually going to contact the hacker. And the hacker is going to put himself in the middle of this transaction. In technical terms, we call this one a man-in-the-middle attack. It's very simple, but it is quite valid. And the hacker is going to go out to tdbank.com for you and going to take a look and see what the TD Bank homepage looks like. They're going to then generate that homepage back to you so it looks accurate. You're going to not know that anything's up because that's the TD Bank homepage as it looked yesterday before you got infected with this virus. So you're going to go ahead and submit your login information, right? Your username, your password, maybe a token. That hacker is going to get very, very excited because now they have your username and password. But before they finish their work, they're going to double check that the login information works. So they're going to go ahead and log on to tdbank.com. When they see that they have a valid username and password, you'll probably end up getting an error page. You might think TD Bank is down or there's a problem with your computer at that point, but by then it's too late. The hacker has all of your login information and is able to start to siphon out money from your bank accounts. This is a very valid thing. This happens to municipalities and has happened to municipalities in the state of New Jersey for sums of $500,000 and more. Now, insurance was able to recover some of that information and pay out the claim, so the municipality wasn't too damaged, but it's still a very real thing, and this often happens because of carelessness when end users are using their computers. So another thing that a lot of people say is, well, I'm a small fish. This never really happens to me, right? Nobody really cares what I do online. I don't do that much. I may not even bank. But there's a lot of other reasons why people do this. We work in a political environment in local government. Sometimes it's for political reasons that somebody might get attacked. Sometimes it's retaliation. Maybe something happened where you issued a violation to a constituent and they get aggravated and attempt to use cyber threats against you. Could be internal threats. Let's go back to our locking of our computers. If we don't lock our computers, and let's say we're in a disagreement with a coworker, there's nothing stopping that coworker from sitting down at your unlocked computer and maybe sending a distasteful email to your supervisor. It's a very real thing that can happen and has happened. And it's an internal threat that could be very easily solved by simply hitting Control-Alt-Delete and Enter on your keyboard and locking that computer when you're away from it. Sometimes people do this just to see if they can. That doesn't happen as much anymore. More often than not, it's for that last bullet point there, financial gain. This is becoming a very real business. It's organized crime that does this, and they make quite a bit of money off of hacking and attacking computer systems. It's also very prevalent in the public mindset right now. And the information on how to do this is readily available. Now, a lot of these are very low-level hacks. They're very easy to protect against, but they show you just how easy this information is to come across. This is a legitimate website called lifehacker.com. They do everything from financial to ways to live easier in your home, and they also do a lot on computers. So here's an article that they put out on how to break into a computer, and they also talk about ways to prevent it from happening to you. That's why they put the information out, but it is out there and readily available on the internet. Here's another article from them, how to break into Windows and crack the password, with a link to download the software that will do it for you. Now again, these are kind of very older attacks. They're very easy to protect against, but they're still out there and they still are valid in many cases. Here's a third article from Lifehacker, how to crack a Wi-Fi's WEP password. Now, if you have Wi-Fi in your home and a simple Wi-Fi router, and you know that you set a WEP password, W-E-P, the E does not stand for encryption. It stands for encapsulation, which means that it's very, very easy to crack. Anybody with a moderate level of computer knowledge and the right tools could sit in front of your house in about 5 minutes and find out what your WEP password is. We encourage everybody, if you know how to set a WEP password, then it's very easy to change it over to a WPA or WPA2 style password, which will do a much better job of protecting you and your Wi-Fi network. Also keep in mind if somebody does get on that Wi-Fi network and conducts less than honest business across it, you could be held responsible for the behavior that they take on your network. So let's take a look at some approaches that we can use to keep ourselves safer both at work and on our home personal computers as well. A lot of what we're going to talk about will apply to both places. The very first thing that you need is some sort of firewall. We talked about the idea of a gatekeeper, watching what comes and goes and making sure that it's supposed to be there. Windows has a built-in firewall. It's pretty good. It's better certainly to have it on than to not have it on. Some antivirus manufacturers also include a firewall with their software. The important thing here is to make sure that you have a firewall on. Now here at the town, the computers that you use on your desks, we do not have the Windows firewall turned on because we have a number of devices at the border of our network that are actually better than the Windows firewall, and we've chosen to say that we're going to protect ourselves on the edge of the network, not necessarily on every individual computer. The very next thing you need to ensure you have is some sort of antivirus. Now, when I used to fix computers on the side, and when I did that, I'd say about 90% of the computers that came to me were having issues due to some sort of malicious software, some bad software on them. And oftentimes, it was because somebody didn't renew their subscription to their antivirus provider. So there's a few things you need to do. First, make sure you have antivirus installed and make sure it's up to date. If you don't have an antivirus, there's a decent one out there called AVG Free. It's, as its name says, free. So I would say install that immediately until you can get something better. It's, again, not the best software out there, but it is certainly better than nothing. Some ISPs provide free antivirus software. Comcast provides Norton for free. If you're a Comcast customer and you subscribe to their internet service, this will suffice for you. And the important thing is to make sure that you renew these. Oftentimes they are annual subscriptions or sometimes they're 3-year subscriptions, but at the end of the subscription period you have to pay again to start getting the definitions again. A lot of people will go throughout the year and say, I didn't get any viruses all year. I don't need to pay that. Well, the whole reason why you didn't get any viruses all year was because your antivirus was doing what it was supposed to do. If you don't pay the subscription fee, it will stop doing whatever it is it's supposed to do, and then you will have a lot of trouble. So antivirus is very important. Here at the town, we have it on everyone's computers, and we're responsible to do that and make sure that it gets up to date and is working. The Center for Internet Security is a nonprofit arm funded partially by the federal government that specializes in cybersecurity and analyzing cyber threats. They have a campaign that they put out called Stop, Think, Connect, and they're urging everybody to apply common sense principles to their computing behavior so that they can think a little bit about what they're going to do online before they connect all the way through. So what I usually like to do when I talk about this is just pose this general question to everybody. If a stranger came to your door at your house and informs you that he or she is from your bank, they would like you to verify a few items for you, and then they ask you what's your name, what's your social security number, what's your date of birth, they might ask you your account number. I don't think anybody in their right mind would necessarily turn that information over to the individual. But somehow, when we get an email that asks for similar or sometimes the same information, maybe in a little bit different context. Maybe it's a prince who wants to have you assist him in protecting some funds. We tend to not think as critically about that, and we sometimes turn over the information. So email is not any different than the real world. It's just that because it's a computer, we tend to not think as much. So what I urge everybody to do is apply those same principles and put it out in the real world. See how you would act if that person came to you face to face. Email isn't any different. So here's another example, right? Oftentimes we'll receive emails from banks. Now, 99% of us here at the township don't deal with banks. So if you get a banking information in your email, you should delete it right away, right? But again, businesses that are legitimate businesses that have legitimate business practices will never ever ask you for account information or personal information over email because it is inherently insecure. Email was built without any form of security. It was built without any form of authentication. It is built just to act as a very transient communication means. So if you do business with a real business that asks for this type of information over email, I would stop doing business with them because they're not very trustworthy. But second of all, any legitimate business will never ask for any sort of personal information via email. You should never, ever provide it. Likewise, we can't assume that attachment is safe. At the beginning of this class, you saw a short video from a gentleman by the name of Kevin Mitnick, who showed you just how easy it was to hide a virus inside of a Word document. So it's very important that we know what we're opening. We have to sometimes verify with the sender that this was something that they intended to send to us. So you want to sometimes pick up the phone and call them. Maybe make sure you're calling them at a number that you know is them, not a number that's in the email. A lot of times we'll get a phone call on my cell phone from a gentleman who says that they're from Cardholder Services and that there's a problem with my credit account. I obviously never call them back. It's a pretty well-known scam at this point. But they will leave you a telephone number, and if you call them back, you're calling the scammer back, right? The hacker. The best thing to do in those kind of situations is go to an authenticated source of information. Go to something that we know is really from our credit card company. So take out your credit card, flip it over. On the back should be a 1-800 number. Call that number and say, I got this strange call saying there's a problem with my account. Was that you guys? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to tell you, no, it wasn't them. But if it was them, then at least you know you're reaching your credit company and not some phony. So always verify the source via a known method of contact. You always seek out your technology staff, right? Myself and the rest of the staff at the IT department are very happy to take a look at these things. We would almost always rather take a look and have it be nothing than have you assume that it was nothing and start an infection of some sort or possibly worse. Links inside of emails are inherently a problem. As a computer professional, or as anybody who types an email really, you can make a link that shows www.cnn.com, go to www.hackersrus.com, and nobody would ever know. So when you get a link inside an email, don't click on it. What we encourage everybody to do is highlight it, right-click on it, and click copy. Not copy link address, because that will copy the hidden URL. But just copy the text and then paste it into a web browser, or better yet, just retype it into a web browser. There's nothing wrong with going to, sharing links via email. It's quite common. But if you want to be sure that you know where you're headed, right? We want to know what our destination is. We want to know that we're going to CNN.com and not HackersRUs.com. Best thing to do is to type it, and type it ourselves. When you're going anywhere that involves banking information or logon information, you need to make sure that it shows HTTPS. And oftentimes it'll have a little yellow closed padlock, or it'll have a green padlock in Chrome that shows you that the certificate, that's a way that computers can authenticate each other. It's a way that a computer knows that the other end of the connection is who they say they are, is legitimate. So HTTPS, always for login information, always for bank account information, always for credit card information, purchases and transactions should always be HTTPS. Sometimes you'll see it SHTTP, which is also okay, but oftentimes it's HTTPS. If you are unsure about a website, if you think a website may not be legitimate or doesn't feel right, something is just off about it, you're getting a lot of pop-ups while you're on it, close it. Move on. Find another website to go to. It's not worth the risk. If your gut is telling you that something's not legitimate, it probably isn't legitimate and you should move on. So now I'd like to bring it back full circle and see if you remember this little phrase that we started with, right? In the digital world, we trust insecure data from unauthenticated and usually untrusted sources. I think we've made a pretty good point about how this happens, right? Unauthenticated, we don't know who they are. Untrusted, we have no level of trust with them. We don't know who's sending us the email, so how could we possibly trust them? And insecure data, meaning we don't know where it's been, right? If we take a file, just a paper file, and we put it into a filing cabinet. We lock that filing cabinet with a key. We're the only person with a key. The next time we come back and unlock it and pull that file out, we can be reasonably sure that it wasn't tampered with. With data, when we send it across the internet, we don't know who's peeked inside. Now, there are some ways to make sure that that doesn't happen. We talked about HTTPS. That's one of those ways to make sure that nobody peeks inside the data and manipulates it. But oftentimes, we're not using HTTPS, so there's no way to know that the data was secure while it was traveling across the internet or across a network. So that's what we mean with all of these kind of different things, is that the internet was built to be an insecure area. It was built to be fast. It was built to be free. It wasn't built to be the top security network of the world. So we have to be a little bit more careful. So how do we stay safe on sign? Let's review some of the concepts that we've talked about. The biggest one is stop before you click. Think about what you're about to do before you move on. We talked about antivirus, making sure it's up to date and making sure that the subscriptions are renewed when they expire. Make sure your computer can do its antivirus scans. If you have a scan set to run at 2 a.m. each morning and you shut down your computer at 10 p.m., it's probably never doing a scan. So if you want your computer to scan, make sure that it's on when it's scheduled to do the scan. We talked about verifying email and email attachments, finding out that it is who they say they are. And as more of a public service announcement, just telling everybody that Windows XP is no longer secure. It's not supported by Microsoft anymore, meaning they're no longer providing security patches for it. So it has become the favorite operating system now of hackers, though I'm sure many people are comfortable with Windows XP and they really like their computers that it runs on because it was a very popular operating system. It is no longer secure, and it is our advice to find a new computer. If you are still running Windows XP, you should get rid of it. Use strong passphrases instead of passwords. So if you typically say maybe you craft your passwords around your names of your pets, right? That's probably not the best method, but let's use it for this example. And you use Rover123 as your password. Instead of that, why not use a passphrase, something like "I love my dog Rover," and you can put the spaces in it. You can put an exclamation point at the end of it. That's a much more secure password. It's a stronger password. It's harder for hackers to crack it. And in fact, the video that you saw at the very beginning of this course, the way that they cracked those passwords, it probably wouldn't have been able to crack a password of that length. It just doesn't work. It breaks the vulnerability that they use to hack. So it makes it much harder for them to do it. And of course, don't use names, dates of birth. Personally, easily guessable information is never a good password. If you're in doubt, don't click on it. Again, trust your gut. If you don't feel good about it, don't do it. Lock your computer when not in use. We keep the operating systems up to date here at the town, but if you at home are getting prompted for Microsoft updates, please do run them and do the reboots afterwards. It is very important. Biggest thing here is don't be curious, right? It's one of these situations where we kind of want to know what's going to happen if we click that. But if we're that curious and we're that unsure, we shouldn't click it. We should move on and just let it die, because it is probably a malicious piece of software. And again, make sure you're allowing your computers to do their scans. The important thing to remember is none of this is 100%, right? We can do everything we can, and the hackers sometimes can still outsmart us. As information technology professionals, we're always behind. The way antivirus works is the hackers release a virus and we provide a definition to combat it. But that means that somebody probably got infected when that virus was released. It's very hard sometimes to keep up with hackers. They spend a lot of time trying to stay ahead of us, and we don't have the resources necessarily to stay ahead of them. So it's very, very important to always think before you act, because the hackers still rely on humans to do something, whether it's download a file, click a link. 9 times out of 10, it's something that an end user did to trigger a malicious piece of software. Very rarely is it a situation where they were able to infect a machine without end users doing something first. Remember, computers always assume that humans are smarter than they are, and sometimes they're not right. So what happens is, if we say it's okay to release a piece of spam, or we say that, yes, we're really sure we want to run that program, The computer's not going to check a third and a fourth time and say, hey, I'm really, really, really sure that this is bad, so you probably don't want to run it. It's might ask you once, are you sure? And then you say yes, and it goes. But it's never going to argue with you. That's not how computers are designed. So we always have to stop, think, and then connect.